It was a Tuesday night, one of those where exhaustion hits before you even sit down. My hands smelled like dish soap and cheap grocery store coffee. I'd just finished another 12-hour shift at the diner, and my 6-year-old son, Caleb, was asleep on the couch clutching his stuffed raccoon. The doorbell rang once, sharp, impatient. It was Mom. No hi, no smile, just that cold little frown she wore like a crown. Dad was behind her, arms crossed, reeking of beer and judgment. "We need to talk," she said, already walking in like it was her house. I glanced around our small 2-room apartment, the one I could barely afford. "Now?" I whispered. Caleb stirred on the couch, and I gently covered him with a blanket. "Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video." Dad grunted. "Your sister's honeymoon's next week. You're the only one who hasn't pitched in. She and Ryan need this, you know. It's their dream trip." I stared at him. "Their dream trip? I'm barely keeping the lights on, Dad." Mom's mouth twisted. "Oh, please. It's not that much. You can skip rent for 1 month. That landlord of yours won't throw you out. She's old and soft. You'll catch up next paycheck." I laughed, bitter and short. "You want me and my son to risk eviction so Natalie can sip champagne in Bali?" Her expression hardened. "Stop making it sound selfish. Family sacrifices for family." I wanted to scream. They hadn't paid for Caleb's school shoes. They hadn't even come to his last birthday. But when it came to Natalie, the golden child, their princess, they'd sell the roof off their own heads for her comfort. Dad's voice rose. "You're living off pity, and you think you can talk back to us? If you were a decent daughter, you'd already have sent money." "Decent?" I snapped. "I've worked every weekend for years. You've never even babysat your grandson." Mom's eyes went icy. "You think we owe you something because you had a kid out of wedlock? You should be grateful we even talked to you." Caleb whimpered in his sleep then, his little voice muffled under the blanket. Something in me cracked. I lowered my tone, trying not to wake him. "Get out, both of you." But Dad stepped closer. His beer breath hit my face. "You'll regret that," he sneered. "Don't come crying when that rent notice hits your door." They slammed the door on their way out, their laughter echoing down the hallway. 2 days later, my landlord left a note taped to the door. "Rent due in 48 hours or eviction will proceed." My stomach twisted. I hadn't even told her yet, but somehow, Mom had already called her. That weekend, they came again. Mom tossed a small trash bag at my feet. "We warned you. The lease is under our name. We co-signed, remember? You're out." Caleb clung to my leg, crying. "Grandma, please, don't make us go." Mom didn't flinch. This is what happens when people bite the hand that feeds them. We spent that night at the bus station, sitting on the cold metal benches. I gave Caleb half a granola bar and pretended I wasn't hungry. Every bus that passed, every homeless man coughing in the corner, it all blurred together until dawn. I wanted to disappear. But Caleb's tiny hand gripping mine stopped me. The next morning, I found a job flyer taped outside a shelter, property caretaker position at an old motel 5 miles away. Housing included. I took it. By the second week, I'd fixed every leaking pipe and cleaned every room. The owner, a kind old man named Henry, noticed. "You work like someone who's been through hell," he said once. I smiled faintly. Close enough. One night, while organizing the storage room, I found old property records in a box labeled foreclosures. There it was, my parents' names, listed as tenants of a rental home owned by the same company that managed this motel. A new inspection was due in 10 days, one that could evict them for multiple violations if I simply filed what was already sitting there. My hands trembled around the dusty papers. For years, I'd let them destroy me. Maybe it was time to let consequences do their work. That was the first night in months that I slept soundly, listening to the wind through cracked motel windows. By the time the inspection date neared, I'd rebuilt a life out of scraps. Caleb had his own little bed now, tucked against the wall of the small motel apartment. He smiled again when he woke up. He hummed when he brushed his teeth. Those small sounds kept me alive. Every morning before sunrise, I'd walk the gravel driveway sweeping leaves, the cold air biting at my fingers. The motel sign flickered vacancy in soft neon pink. It wasn't home yet, but it was peace. Then, one afternoon, as I was fixing a loose door hinge in room 3B, a familiar voice made my stomach twist. "Leah!" I froze. My sister Natalie stood in the doorway wearing a bright sundress, her nails perfect, her face smooth and smug. "I heard you're working here," she said, letting the word here drip with disgust. "Wow, you've really hit bottom." I wiped my hands on my jeans and looked her straight in the eye. "Did Mom send you?" She tilted her head. "She wanted to know if you're finally done being dramatic. You could have helped us instead of embarrassing the family. Ryan's parents were shocked when they heard we had to pay for our own honeymoon." "Good," I said quietly. "Maybe they'll learn something about you." Her smile faded. "You really think you're better than us, huh? You with your little job and your charity apartment?" I stepped closer, calm now. "No, Natalie. I just think I've finally learned to stop kneeling for people who'd step on my neck." She stared at me, fuming, then hissed, "Mom was right. You're poison. Tell her to check her lease." I said flatly. Her brow furrowed. "What?" I turned back to the door hinge, pretending to adjust it. Never mind. That night, I stayed late in the office, flipping through inspection files again. The photos of their rental property were worse than I'd thought. Cracked walls, illegal wiring, black mold under the bathroom tiles. Dad had been ignoring repairs for years. Mom had falsified receipts on her last inspection. All I had to do was send a single email to the city housing department attaching the files. But my hands hovered over the mouse. Revenge sounded easy until you saw your own family's names under pending violation notice. Caleb padded into the room, rubbing his eyes. "Mommy, why are you crying?" I blinked hard, wiping my face. "Just tired, baby." He pointed at the laptop screen. "Is that Grandma?" "Yes," I whispered. He frowned. "She was mean to us." That broke me again, his voice so small, so sure. I closed the laptop and pulled him into my arms. "She won't hurt us anymore, I promise." The next day, a storm rolled in, gray skies, thunder rumbling. I submitted the report before I could change my mind. By evening, the call came from Henry, the motel owner. "Leah, you did the right thing. The city needed those records." I thanked him softly, then stepped outside. Rain lashed the cracked parking lot, washing dust off the faded motel sign. I stood there and let it hit my face until it burned. 3 days later, I got a message. It was from Mom. "Mom, are you happy now? They said we have to vacate by next week. You ruined us. You ruined everything." I stared at the message, my hands steady for once. I didn't reply. I didn't delete it either. I wanted to remember exactly how silence felt when it was deserved. That night, Caleb asked if we could light one of the old candles I'd found in the storage room. The power flickered from the storm, and the flame glowed between us like a tiny sun. "Does this mean we have a home now?" he asked sleepily. I smiled. "Yeah, maybe for the first time." He leaned his head on my shoulder. "Then we don't need Grandma anymore." I kissed his hair and whispered, "No, baby, we really don't." Outside, thunder rolled again, but it didn't sound like fear this time. It sounded like something breaking free. The day they lost everything wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic like in the movies. It was quiet, clinical, and deserved. A week after Mom's text, I was mopping the motel lobby floor when I heard the creak of the front door. The smell hit me before I even looked up. Cheap perfume mixed with stale cigarette smoke. Mom walked in, holding an umbrella that had seen better days. Behind her, Dad lumbered in, his face drawn, carrying a duffel bag that looked almost empty. "Leah," Mom started, her tone brittle but soft enough to sound rehearsed. "We need to talk." I didn't stop mopping. "You found the shelter okay?" Her mouth tightened. "This isn't funny." Dad dropped the bag on the floor with a dull thud. "You had no right," he said, his voice trembling between anger and disbelief. "We're your parents. You think you can humiliate us like this? Over what? Some old rent payments?" I leaned the mop against the counter and met his eyes. Over what you did to me and my son. Over leaving us to freeze outside because your princess needed a vacation. Mom's face twitched, a shadow of guilt flickering but quickly smothered by pride. You could have come home any time. You made your choices. I laughed, cold and hollow. You mean the choice to raise my child without turning him into a monster? Yeah, I made that one. Dad slammed his fist on the counter. You think you're some hero because you got lucky with a job at this dump? I stepped closer, my voice steady now. No, I think I'm someone who finally stopped letting you define what I deserve. They stared at me, two people who had spent my whole life making me feel small, now standing in a place they would have once mocked, asking for help. Mom's voice cracked. They said the inspection wasn't your doing, but I know it was. You told them, didn't you? I didn't deny it. All I did was submit the truth. The same truth you buried under fake receipts and charm. She looked around the shabby motel lobby, disgust flickering again in her eyes. We need a place to stay until things get sorted out. I turned my back to her, wiping the counter slowly. We're full. Her voice turned sharp, venomous. You'd really turn your parents away after everything we did for you? I faced her again. After everything you did to me. You left your daughter and your grandson on a bus station floor because I wouldn't pay for your other daughter's trip to Bali. You laughed while I begged for mercy. So yes, I'm turning you away. For a moment, they just stood there, the sound of the rain outside filling the silence. Then Dad's face crumpled, not with remorse, but with rage. You'll regret this when he grows up to hate you. I looked toward the hallway. Caleb stood there in his pajamas, small but unafraid. You mean him? I said softly. Dad followed my gaze. Caleb looked up at him, his voice steady. I don't hate my mom. I hate bullies. The room went still. Mom took a step back, her eyes glistening, but her pride still clinging like frost. You've changed, she said bitterly. You used to care. I still care, I said. Just not about you. She tried to speak again, but her words broke off into a sob that wasn't quite real, more habit than pain. Dad grabbed her arm and muttered something under his breath as they turned and left. The bell above the door jingled as it shut behind them. Caleb walked up to me, slipping his hand into mine. Are they gone for good? I knelt beside him, meeting his big brown eyes. I think so. Baby! He smiled, a tiny, tired smile. Good, they were mean. I hugged him close. We're safe now. Weeks passed. The winter wind eased. The motel's owner, Henry, retired and left me in charge permanently. Business picked up when I painted the rooms, fixed the signs, and turned the place into something livable. One afternoon, as I cleaned out the lost and found drawer, I found a postcard. It was from Natalie. You went too far. They're living out of their car now. Hope you're proud. I turned it over. There was no address, just her perfect handwriting and a faint scent of her perfume. I smiled faintly and tucked it into the trash bin. Proud? I whispered to myself. No, free. That night, I sat with Caleb on the motel's porch. He was coloring with cheap crayons on a napkin. The sunset burned orange and pink over the parking lot. For the first time, I didn't feel like the world owed me anything, or that I owed it. Caleb looked up at me. Mommy, do we have a home now? I brushed his hair back, the wind tugging at my sleeves. Yeah, honey, and no one can take it away from us. He nodded solemnly and went back to coloring. Behind us, the motel sign buzzed faintly, vacancy. But for the first time in my life, my heart felt full. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video.